Well, one other way to look at this, and then I'll stop, about the Golden Triangle, is that in history the relationship were always bipolar. So when policy is created and the planning of large processes takes place, there's a relationship between knowledge and government. When it comes to the phase of tendering and construction, there's no relationship with research anymore. There's just a relationship between government and the private sector, the constructors. And when it comes to evaluation, there's none. There's no evaluation, because there's always the next project. And you're very happy that it's finished, and let's stop about it, let's stop talking about it and start with the next project. And what we want, what we have reached now and what we want to strengthen in the future is that all three parties are always connected in all phases of programs and projects. So it may be that in the planning phase the relationship between knowledge and government is the strongest one, but keep the private sector informed, keep them connected to what you're doing, so they can prepare, so they can bring in the knowledge they have, the experience they have, which is a lot, and make sure that government knows what private sector can bring into the project. Now, the same goes for the other phases. I don't have to spell it out. So what are important factors to be successful? That's you need good government, good policy, not changing every month or every half a year. And if you want to be successful with your knowledge and your private sector abroad, you need a successful economic diplomacy. So you need ministers traveling all over the world with a delegation of businessmen and research people who explain to other countries, doors opened by the politicians, what it is they can do and what the other country could profit from that. What you need is good research institutes. It's easy to say, but it's not so easy to bring into practice, because you have to do research on several scales. You have to do theoretical research, so you have to have a very good connection to what the universities are doing. You have to be in on that. When I'm talking about Deltares, we have about 70 PhD students connected to our projects and programs, and we have somewhere between 15 and 20 people who are part-time professors at the university. So the link between what the universities do and research and what we are doing is created through these people, because I've never been able to influence research programs of universities in any other way. If you just ask them, would you be so kind as to research this or that, they say that's okay, and they don't do it. Because they have their own priorities and their own people, and well, it's understandable. So if you want to influence that, you have to bring the research to them, with the people who do the research, and with the environment, our own institute, the environment where they can do the research, and then you can have a lot of influence on what the program at the university is. So that's theoretical research. You need it's connected in our field with practical research, physical research, and scaled research in research facilities, and field research as well. So you need the scale of both the scaled research, the field research, one-on-one, and the theoretical research. And of course we do a lot of modeling with software, where we can emulate reality and test things on reality, and at the same time test the software. We're not really testing reality because they're very difficult to change. And as a third, you need good companies, not just companies that want to get in and make a quick buck and get out again. You need companies that are willing to take responsibility, that are willing to be a front for a sector or a part of a sector, and that are not protective of their own knowledge, which is very hard, because companies invest in knowledge and they tend to want to get a return on investment quickly. But in practice, it's often so, not always, it's often so that if you're more open about your knowledge and willing to share, or not as much afraid that others will steal it from you, you'll get so much ahead of them that they can't really catch up anymore. So then you're a market leader, and for the difficult projects, where you usually can earn a lot of money, they'll go to you and not to your imitators, or used to be competitors. So you choose a strong position in the market. That's what it's all about. It goes for knowledge just the same as for companies, and it goes for government. And when you talk about export and trying to get work abroad in any other way, you need a strong government as well. Well, then a few remarks about the research itself. If you want to be successful doing research, applied research, you need it to be demand-driven. If I don't have a strong drive from the demand side, I cannot have my people do the right things. Because then they follow their curiosity, or what they heard at the birthday party, or what they thought up under the shower, or whatever. They need to be aware of the problems of others so that they can work on these problems. If they are not aware of that, they are not going to do it. If you make them aware of that, they're quite willing to research anything. I mean, that's my experience. They're willing to research anything, as long as you are able to explain why it's important for us, for them, for society, to have results. You need disciplinary excellence. You need very good researchers, otherwise you won't get anywhere. But that's not enough. You need to work interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary. You need to involve what I always call exotic disciplines. Well, one time we had a linguist in, because we discovered that there was a language problem, an understanding problem between the parties involved in the project, and we needed to find a way to have a common communication about what we were doing. So we had linguists who analyzed the words we used and the meaning we gave to the same words, to be able to, and the funny thing is that these linguists brought in a number of things that were very influential on the research itself. So it opened new doors in the minds of the people. Well, this is exotic, of course, but do not work monodisciplinary, because the chance that the party who receives the results of the work is not content is close to 100%. You need to include the social sciences, because if you don't, your product, your reports will end up in a closet without ever being read. I was a civil servant for 30 years before I went to work with Deltaris, and I tried to scare my people by saying I spent tens, maybe if you add it all up, hundreds of millions on research as a civil servant. I never read one report, not one. Not one. They're at the wrong time, it's the wrong subject, it's the wrong way to talk about the subject, it scares people away from the policy you're trying to make. So I had people, of course, who read them, but I kept them away from policy. Well, if you want to, this is a caricature, of course, but if you, a reality, but a caricature, no, it's a strange reality, I must admit that. But if you want to have your reports be of influence, you must involve yourself in the processes that the client is in. You must understand what his problem is. And sometimes the problem is that he just felt he had to formulate a research question, because a project without research is not really serious. Well, if that's the case, you're in trouble, because anything you deliver is wrong. So you have to get in league with people like that, and you have to define research questions that are relevant and that are really going to change the quality of the results. Well, you need cooperation, and talked about that. If you want to go to the foreign market, you have to create your consortia with other people before going to that market abroad. Because if you're already there, practice teaches us that there is no cooperation at all. We went into Louisiana and New Orleans after Katrina. That's the government, research, private organizations, all went there. It was like an armada. And there was a lot of work done by Dutch parties, but they did not cooperate with each other. And we're all in one small country, we all know each other, but they did not cooperate because they were in a competitive situation, a competitive mood, and they were not going to cooperate because it would cost money. So if you want to cooperate, you have to make your consortia at home, and then go to the market and say, we, as a consortium, are able to offer you this and that. And of course, you need international cooperation. It is not enough to work with the scientists in your own university, your own institute, your own country, but you have to find the best people all over the world and involve them in the work you're doing in some way. Make them part of a knowledge position audit committee or whatever. Think of fancy names, get them over here and have them involved in what you're doing, interested, so that they can comment on what you're doing even if they live on the other side of the world. Well, one more thing, that's the development in Dutch business. There were serious budget cuts because of the euro crisis. We call it the euro crisis because it's in Europe, but that's maybe being a bit small-minded. These budget cuts have been sold by the government by a policy that's called the top sector policy. So they appointed 9 top sectors in the economy. Water is one of them. And water is then water technology, drinking water, delta technology, flood safety, and marine technology. And they, the money that was left, they pushed to these 9 sectors. And more than that, it's 700 million I mentioned of the NWO organization. They said half of that must be used for applied research aimed at these top sectors. So there was a lot of grumbling and angry people. But in the end, we have a situation where this really might start to work. And the funny thing is that the government organized it. They created a governance for this whole thing, and in this governance, they had a top team for every top sector, which is very much top oriented. And these top teams are have a front runner, a president, a chair. And they have someone from the private sector, from government, and from knowledge. So the idea of working together in the Golden Triangle now has been solidified in policy and become common practice. Well, maybe I can. I have time for one example of how this might work. It's called Building with Nature. Project. The idea behind building with nature is that if we want to protect a certain piece of land from floods, we build walls around it. That's what you do if you have a lot of money and not much sense. So that's what we did a lot of the time. But it's it's sometimes very counterproductive. So it's better to be smart and to find ways to entice nature to do the work for you. So you might create wetlands, for instance, or you might try to rehabilitate the wetlands that used to be there, that take the energy out of the waves and protect the country behind it. Then you let nature do the work. We have a number of experiments with levees where we had certain trees and shrubs on the levees, which is really up till now not done because it might bring the integrity of the levees in a dangerous situation. But now the levees can be 1 to 1.5 meters lower, which is quite a considerable difference in investment. So there are countless examples. I'm be happy to talk about them with you later. But the idea is that 2 large dredging companies, 2 of the largest in the world, who happen to reside in the Netherlands, said we are Van Oort. Is the name in Boskalis, that we are interested in investing money in this new way of working because they saw that worldwide it's not possible to go on with just dredging solutions, just hard solutions going against nature. Well, one of the areas where they learned this wisdom was Australia, because it's very hard to win a contract here if you're not very good at protecting nature, and the best way to protect nature is create a situation where nature is incapable of protecting itself. So this needs another way of thinking, and this research program was aimed at that. We were one of the people who tried to do this together with the dredgers, and it's successful because half of the money is paid by the government, and the government was willing to pay this because the ministry involved, the Ministry of Infrastructure and Public Work, since then part of another ministry, but that's one of the things we have in common as well, I believe, was one of the few ministers who hadn't had any money from this innovation budget at all. So we said you can't let that happen. That's I mean, and the ministry is important as that cannot. It's really not possible that they don't have a large chunk of money out of this budget. So they shared that opinion and they went to work, and we got some 30 million euro from the government.